So one of the interesting things about Jump that's fairly new, but I've seen some of the insights that you guys been able to put out is that, obviously you get this really rich data set. You've been able to kind of go through and get some insights that are, I wouldn't say controversial, but it maybe have kind of put some thinking on the head. I think one of the ones I saw was around how much advisors talk versus the client talks and what the advisor thought. The advisor thinks they're talking 20% of the time, where it's actually the opposite. Can you share with me, some of the insights specifically around that one, but some of the other insights that you've been able to glean?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been a really fun evolution for us. Jump now has something like 1.2 million different conversations that have been processed on the Jump platform. So you can imagine if you're a data scientist or a researcher, that's like a dream. It's a dream, right? Because you can actually understand reality. And so what we do is we take sets of conversations, we render them completely anonymous and aggregated. So what that means is the data set that we use to do our research, it's scrubbed of all of the PII and confidential information. So it's a safe, clean data set it's irreversibly anonymized. So we take that as the data, and then we start to ask questions like, what's the balance of talk time between a client and an advisor? And the one that you mentioned is one of my favorites because it's just so funny. So if you go look at the survey data will say that 80, and it's either 87 or 88, I can't remember. It's 87, let's say 87% of advisors believe that they talk less than the client talks. And so it's I'm doing as much listening, I'm doing more listening than I am.
More listening, yeah, right.
And then if you look at the Jump data, it's almost exactly the opposite, right? It's like 84% or something in there of advisors talk more than they listen. And so it's just kind of a really funny and stark example of how it's actually very hard to be self-aware, right? Like we all have these blind spots. And so our goal with our Insights program is to start to shine a light on, let's all be more self-aware about what we're doing. Let's also be more aware about what's on the client's mind as we look across a firm or across the whole industry. I'll just share one example there. So over the last few months, we've obviously had a lot of activity on the tariffs front and on the kind of new legislation front. And what we found from the data was if a client comes in and they bring up concerns about tariffs and how that might affect them moving forward, they're 3 times more likely to request to deviate from their financial plan, right? And say, hey, I want to move stuff into cash, or I want to move stuff into money market. Kind of similar thing around talk about the big, beautiful bill. If they show up with concerns, and it doesn't matter, it's tariffs this year, it's big, beautiful bill this year, it could be anything, right? But if there's some kind of change in the air that they're concerned about, they're much more likely to ask to deviate from their plan. So it's good to be prepared for that. Another recent one is around concerns or fears about tax. So you would expect that would peak kind of end of year leading into April, when most people, that's when they have taxes on their mind. Because of all this new legislation and people are still trying to figure out how's it going to affect me and how does it change the tax treatment of my personal situation, there's actually more fear right now about tax than there was during tax season, which is pretty interesting. So those are some things around kind of, the mindset of the end investor. And then on the other side, we can look at what actually works. Advisors have all different ways that they talk to new prospective clients. They have all different ways that they explain things to clients when they're trying to give rationale for their recommendations. And it turns out not all of those approaches are equal, right? Maybe no big surprise there, but just one simple example is if an advisor can find a quick win in that initial intro meeting, maybe they say, hey, I've already identified that I can save you $500 on taxes, or I've already identified that you've got this 401k that is over allocated to your old company's stock and it's just kind of languishing. We need to move that over so you can get a better return on that. Just some kind of a quick win it's significantly correlated with that prospect becoming a new client, right? And so our goal with Insights is really just to start to uncover those golden nuggets and put them in the hands of advisors everywhere to help them be more successful.
Builds that trust that gives you demonstrating value right away, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. I before I got on this podcast, I fed a couple of transcripts into AI to make sure I wasn't talking too much too. I wanted to know what percentage I was talking to versus my guests. I think that's interesting that you think you're being present, you think you're being active listener, but in some cases you may actually be talking too much.